and introduce our first plenary speaker, Kapil Gupta. He confronts wicked problems in international relations. He'll probably confront a lot more soon. As a U.S. Foreign Service officer since 2005, he served multiple tours abroad. He is a fellow Cornellian with a JD in public law, and he's on detail right now to the Executive Office of the President in the Office of Management and Budget. So please welcome Kapil.
Mic on? Good morning. My name is Kapil Gupta. I'm a U.S. Foreign Service officer and also a Cornell alum. What I'm going to be presenting to you this morning are my own personal perspectives on the relevance of systems thinking to diplomacy. So as a diplomat, how I think of my work, I've represented at the top a series of different ideas. Country A, engaging on particular topics in the context of relations with other countries. So we can use DSRP to unpack each of those different ideas and elements. But as I have been engaging and using DSRP, what I became aware of is that any particular time that we are doing something in the government context, we're actually operating on 3 dimensions simultaneously. So to be self-reflective for a moment, let's look at the topic axis. Right? So the topic today is systems thinking, diplomacy, water policy issues. And that's sort of the traditional silos that we operate in, right? The topics that we're in. The process here is, I was invited by Derek and Laura to come and speak to you. I had to develop a presentation. I had to get feedback on it. I had to get approval from 7 different offices in order to come here and present to you. And now I'm here. The final dimension is what I've called semiotics. So this is sort of how do we create meaning? How do we communicate? How do we use language to create an understanding? So I'm using Prezi, I'm using MetaMap, I'm using videos. So as we go through the next couple of slides, try and keep in mind that all 3 dimensions are really operating simultaneously. I'm going to show you now a video that the White House produced based on President Obama's recent trip to Greece. Now, even though he doesn't use the word diplomacy once, I think that this clip really encapsulates for me a certain essence, a certain perspective, his perspective on what is diplomacy. Now, as you're watching it, I'd ask you to count how many times he uses the word signal. Right? That's an awareness of sort of that semiotic dimension. Let's take a look.
One of the great joys of being a president is the ability to travel and see different cultures and meet different people. That's important for our national security, but it's also important for us to understand ourselves and our place in the world. We've got the Parthenon behind us, part of the Acropolis. It is here in Athens that so many of our ideas about democracy, our notions of citizenship, our notions of rule of law began to develop. And so when you visit a site like this, not only are you getting a better understanding of Greece and Western culture, but you're also sending a signal of the continuity that exists between what happened here, the speeches of Pericles, and what happened with our founding fathers. And it's a very important role for the President of the United States to send a signal to the world that their culture, their traditions, their heritage Their monuments are something of value and are precious, and that we have learned from them, because what that does then is, I think, sends a strong signal around the world that we view ourselves as part of a broader humanity and a community of nations that can work together to solve problems and lift up what's best in humanity.
So we could unpack everything he said there. We could spend an hour doing that or more. What you see is, again, the three dimensions: the ability to travel, the ability to meet different people. These are processes. These are things that we can practically do. It's important for our national security, right? The topical dimension. How do we define national security? What I want to focus on is the final point, which is diplomacy as a means to understand our place in the world. So if you were counting, the president used the word signal 3 times. And so what he was saying is that it's important for the US to signal respect and appreciation for other countries. And this is a way for us to actually understand ourselves better. And what diplomacy allows us to do is to understand ourselves, the United States, as part of humanity, as part of the community of nations, to do 2 things, which are profound, I think, which is to lift up what's best in humanity and to work together to solve problems. How many of you share that view that that is a valid goal of diplomacy? Please raise your hand. Let's take a look at the role of the United States in the world from a different perspective.
Greek protesters and riot police have clashed in central Athens after anti-US rallies turned violent. Petrol bombs were met with tear gas as rioters tried to break through police cordons to reach Parliament buildings. About 7,000 people, among them anti-war, anti-racism, leftist groups, trade unionists and Communist Party supporters, all expressed their anger at Washington. We consider American policy as murderous to the people. They're responsible for the outcome of the Arab Spring, for all the wars since then, for the intervention in Syria. They only care for oil and don't care about the people. The outbreak of violence came as President Obama was having dinner nearby with members of the Greek government. Demonstrators were also at odds with Obama's successor, Donald Trump, his pledge to build a wall on America's southern border and his general stance over immigrants.
So 2 vastly differing perspectives on the role of the United States in the world. Right? In that position of conflict, that's where we as diplomats operate. We are, on the one hand, representing to the world our beliefs about ourselves and what we're trying to do. And we're confronting very different perspectives about who we are, what we symbolize, and our impact on the world. So one of the real challenges of diplomacy is resolving this tension, sometimes changing the narrative, changing perceptions about the United States. But really, perception management is only a small part of what we do as diplomats. What we are actually doing more often than not is using our diplomatic platform to better understand the world, the complexity of all the different actors, and to try to develop better programs and policies to achieve that lifting up what's best in humanity and solving problems together. So in the context of US-Greek relations, this is just a very simple diagram which shows on the US, we have multiple actors. The Greek side, there's multiple actors, there's multiple perspectives, and there's various issues that we can work together on. But really, diplomacy is not just about bilateral relations, it's about the entire network of relations that we have with multiple countries, multiple actors. And so this gets really messy really quick, and no one meta map can capture that. Right? But the good news is that the State Department, we have access to this information. We have an understanding of all the different actors, how they're engaging in particular programs, how they're responding to certain things that we do. And so from a practical standpoint, one of the projects I was involved with was a human-centered design evaluation of our knowledge management practices, right? How do we use all of this information that we gather more effectively? And so they use nodes and edges, and I've translated that to a DSRP map. So again, what we're shifting from is from sort of the perspectival, the semiotic dimension to practically, how do we use this information in the day-to-day? How do we capture it and use it? So just to conclude, again, I'd ask for your feedback on whether these 3 dimensions are useful, because ultimately why I'm here is to engage with an academic audience, practitioners from the water space and other areas to figure out how we can combine our insights and our understanding of the complexity to essentially make the world a better place and lift up what's best. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kapil.